Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Learn English with Photos. My name is Geoffrey Hill and this lesson is based on photos I took during a visit to the Glengoyne Whisky Distillery in Scotland. In the first part of the lesson I'll tell you about my visit, then we'll look at some of the vocabulary in more detail, and finally you'll get the chance to answer some questions. Glengoyne, which is about 15 miles north of Glasgow, has been called Scotland's most beautiful distillery. It was founded in 1833 and has produced single malt Scotch whisky for nearly 200 years. The distillery is situated in a wooded valley in the southern Highlands of Scotland, close to a small river that flows into the famous Loch Lomond. Glengoyne is one of the few distilleries producing whisky in this part of Scotland today. However, at the beginning of the 19th century, it's recorded that at least 18 whisky stills were in operation in this area. But these, like many others at that time, were illegal. Whisky producers were forced to produce whisky illicitly, as they were unable to pay the heavy taxes imposed by the government on spirit production to fund wars against France. Smuggling became rife, and the hills and glens around Glengoyne formed a perfect cover for this lawless activity. It wasn't until the 1820s that an Act of Parliament was passed, reducing the duty on spirits and the cost of a licence to distill, which put an end to illegal production. This gave rise to a rush of stills being legalised, including those at Glengoyne in 1833. It's reputed that Glengoyne was one of only a few stills to be licensed in the Southern Highlands due to the high quality of the whisky it produced. Today, in addition to producing whisky, Glengoyne offers a range of guided tours that take you behind the scenes at the distillery and give you an insight into the production process. We chose the cheapest tour, which cost £7 and included a wee dram, or small glass, of Glengoyne 10-year-old Highland single malt whisky, sláinte as they say in Scotland. Our guide explained that the same traditional distillation methods and basic ingredients, barley, water and yeast, have been used to make Scotch whisky for over 500 years. The water used to come from this waterfall behind the distillery, but now it's piped in from a reservoir a few miles away. Here we can see one of the giant copper stills which are used to distill the whisky. The final character of the whisky is affected by the wood of the cask in which it matures. Glengoyne uses carefully selected Spanish and American oak casks, some of which will have been seasoned with sherry in Spain before shipping to Scotland. Glengoyne's malts are left to mature in the distillery's warehouses for a minimum of 10 years. If you're interested in finding out more about the whisky making process, you should visit the Glengoyne Distillery website. At the end of the tour, we visited the shop, which is located inside the oldest warehouse on the site. The Whisky Wall features a wide range of whiskies of different ages and prices. This 40-year-old malt costs £3,750. Unfortunately, I knew that I wouldn't be able to take it on the flight back to France. Otherwise, I would have been tempted. The shop also sells a selection of Glengoyne branded merchandise, including glassware, clothing, foods, confectionery, preserves, books, and a range of whisky collectibles, which you can also buy online. So I hope you enjoyed the tour. Now let's go over some of the vocabulary we've seen. I'll say each word and you can repeat it after me. I'll also make a few comments along the way. Barley. Barley. Barley is a cereal that is used in the making of beer and whisky. Cask. Cask. The whisky is matured in casks made of oak. Clothing. Clothing. Clothing is a general term for the things that people wear. Note that the word clothing is uncountable, so you cannot say, for example, a clothing. You would have to say a piece of clothing. Confectionery. Confectionery. Confectionery is a general term for sweets and chocolates. Distillery. Distillery. A distillery is a place where whisky or other strong alcoholic drinks are made by a process of distillation. Dram. Dram. In Scotland, a dram is a small measure of whisky. Glassware. Glassware. Glassware is a general term for objects made of glass, such as drinking containers, bowls, ornaments and the like. Note that the suffix ware is found in other words such as kitchenware or tableware. Glen. Glen. In Scotland, a glen is a deep, narrow valley, especially in the mountains. A lot of Scottish place names and whiskies begin with the prefix Glen, for example Glengoyne, Glenfiddich or Glencoe. Highlands. Highlands. The Highlands are the mountainous region in central and northern Scotland. You may have heard of the Highland Games or the film Highlander. Ingredients. Ingredients. Ingredients are the things used to make food dishes or drinks like whisky. Malt. Malt. Malt is a substance that is made from grain such as barley, which is soaked in water and then dried in a hot oven. Merchandise. Merchandise. Merchandise is a word used to refer to articles which carry the name and or logo of a particular company. In the picture, for example, we can see some merchandise from the Arsenal Football Club, including a mug, a passport cover and a pen set. There's also a hip flask, very useful for carrying your whisky about in. Note that the word merchandise is uncountable, so you can't use it in the plural. Oak. Oak. Oak is a strong hard wood which comes from the oak tree. Preserves. Preserves. Preserves are foods such as jam that are made by cooking fruit with sugar. Scotch. Scotch. Scotch is whisky which is made in Scotland. You shouldn't use the word Scotch to refer to the Scottish people. Don't say he's Scotch, but he's Scottish, or he's a Scotsman. Scotland. Scotland. Scotland is the country which occupies the northern third of the island of Great Britain. At the time of recording, Scotland is part of the United Kingdom, along with Wales, Northern Ireland, and of course England. But that may change in 2014 when they're planning to hold a referendum on independence. Single malt. Single malt. A single malt is a whisky made at one particular distillery using one particular type of malted grain. The other main type of whisky is blended whisky, which is made by mixing different types of whisky, often from different distilleries. Blended whisky tends to be cheaper than single malt. Spirits. Spirits. Spirits are strong alcoholic drinks such as whisky, vodka or gin. Still. Still. A still is a piece of equipment used to make strong alcoholic drinks by a process known as distilling or distillation. Warehouse. Warehouse. A warehouse is a large building where goods are stored before they are distributed or sold. Whisky. Whisky. Whisky is a strong alcoholic drink made from grains such as barley or rye. Of course, Scotland is famous for whisky, but whisky is also made in other countries such as Ireland, Canada, or even Japan. Note that the word whisky can be countable, as in whisky is my favourite drink, or uncountable, as in would you like a whisky? In this respect, it's the same as the word beer. For some reason, the word wine is different. So you couldn't say, for example, would you like a wine? You would have to say, would you like a glass of wine? And last but not least, we have the word yeast. Yeast. Yeast is a kind of fungus which is used to make bread rise, and also used in making alcoholic drinks such as beer and whisky, of course. In this final part of the lesson, you'll have the opportunity to use some of the language we've studied. I'm going to ask you a series of questions about whisky and Scotland. I suggest you pause the video while you answer. Don't just reply with yes or no, try to make your answers as detailed as possible. Okay, let's begin. Question 1. Have you ever drunk whisky? Question 2. If you're a whisky drinker, how do you like to drink your whisky? Question 3. Why do you think Scotch is so popular? Question 4. Have you ever been to Scotland? Question 5. What do you know about Scotland? Question 6. Can you name any famous Scots? Question 7. What is Scotland known for apart from whisky? Question 8. What would you have bought as a gift or souvenir from the Glengoyne shop? Right, that's all for now. I hope you found this lesson useful. If so, look out for the next instalment of Learn English with Photos.